Hello, I'm Sora Luxon, and this is Magick lesson number 69, Complainers. I was actually going to start getting into some stuff about raising solar energy today, but I'm going to put that off because I had a direct message, and it just seemed so relevant. I stopped to think about whether or not to answer these questions that I'm going to lay out. I'm going to read you the message, but I stopped and thought, do I want to answer this? Because I usually prefer to focus on the positive, to give you those lessons that allow you to place your focus where it needs to be, rather than to talk about problems and have you focus in that way. But this message seemed so pertinent that I'm going to read it to you, and it's what today's lesson is going to be about. Hello, Soar. I listen to a few different occultists on YouTube. Good for you, right? That's wonderful, fellow truth seeker. Perspective never hurts anyone. It's good to not get roped into any one mentor, podcaster, magical trainer, whatever you want to call them. So good job. You listen to different people. That's wonderful. Listening is wonderful. And one of them talks very slow and very low. He seems to sell a lot of virtual products like Magick lessons, and he talks about how much he hates YouTube a lot. Okay, there's a couple of red flags there, but nothing you can't learn valuable lessons from in other ways. To continue with this message, he also seems to get injured a lot and talks about it on his channel. He talks about surgeries, his cats getting sick, other magicians attacking him with hexes. And then there's a ... here. You don't seem to complain or discuss those sorts of things. No, I don't. Thank you for noticing. Part of that, though, is because I don't own cats. Does nothing go wrong in your life, or is the other occultist I'm listening to just not good, very good? I don't want to waste my money on his lessons if he's fake. Okay, so you can see maybe why I've decided to make this the lesson for today, responding to this question, this series of questions. There is a lot to unpackage here, and some of it is very important to beginning occultists. I don't know the other channels this person is listening to, so I won't go so far as to say that the person they're listening to is quote-unquote fake. All I have is this description of an interpretation of someone's behavior, and energetically, it's always good to keep in mind that no one is ever actually fake. Right? Even if you're reacting poorly to them or they seem like a negative influence in some way, they're still a person. Even if what they're doing is manipulative or shallow or vapid or disingenuous, they're still behaving in a way, and that behavior isn't fake in and of itself. They might be willfully misleading others, but that doesn't make their action any less real or valid in other ways. They just probably aren't going to be ways that you perceive as beneficial. Very often with people teaching magic lessons, magical practices, occult practices in general, when they're teaching these things ineptly or purposefully ineffectually, it's because of some energetic signature they haven't fully worked out in themselves yet, some course in their evolution, whether or not they know it, that they haven't moved through in their journey yet. Usually, it's a past undissolved or unresolved trauma of some kind. Just like anyone you come across in your daily life that seems very negative, very unhappy, very angry, very bitter. Those are usually signs inside of the human mammal of I'm in pain. And so I am now transferring this pain in this other way. So usually it's an internalized character trait left unevolved, a blind spot in their own mirror. Granted, that doesn't make them an appropriate mentor generally. And I think that's what you've picked up on here. That's what you're asking about. So kudos to you. Because no, that's not necessarily someone that you should be listening to as your advisor or taking guidance from. You shouldn't listen to them. And yet it's a decision. So whether you should listen to them is a decision that you should make based on your observances. And if your observances tell you that this might not be the best use of your time, then don't, make them the focus of your practices or for who you learn from as your teacher. If you're aware of their missteps. But that also doesn't mean, and this is really important, that whoever's doing this is any less human, any less real, any less prone to error than you or me or anyone else. And labels like the word fake really do have a way of creeping into our own subconsciouses when we use them and distancing us from energetic channels that we are very much in contact with no matter what. So that's something to keep in mind. You don't have to listen to this person. And I certainly wouldn't advise attempting to learn from them, to base your own magical workings from their teachings given the way you've described them. You don't want to be downloading their same inexperience or their same inefficiency or their same bitterness or inappropriate inconsideration of others. But I also wouldn't call them fake for your own good, for your own well-being. If you are listening to someone who complains a lot about something, because you talk about this here, this person complains a lot, talks about surgeries, other people attacking him. So when someone is constantly complaining about the problems they have, you said they complain about, this person tends to complain about problems they have with YouTube. I don't know what that means exactly, but what you're being indoctrinated with at a subconscious level is not what they're talking about, but complaint, the action that they're taking in audio in front of you. And that action is to complain. So that is what you're being indoctrinated with. It doesn't matter if the complaints are valid, real, not real, none of that matters. Complaint is the behavior you are being taught. And if someone's claiming to be an advanced magical practitioner while also behaving that way, you've already picked up on this. They're either overreaching in a big way and not quite balance themselves emotionally, energetically, spiritually. Possibly they're completely out of their depth. Possibly they're oblivious to their own behavioral patterns, which doesn't speak highly of them as a trained magi. Or they're entirely aware, and this could be worse. So it could be that they're oblivious to how they're behaving, and that's not good. Or they're entirely aware of how they're behaving, of what they're doing, and feeding you that on purpose. A slow-paced, low, monotone. You described that they speak slow and low. That monotone paired with, a complaint monologue could very much be on purpose by them to addict you to their channel. Because that is a strategy for doing that. That is a tactic. Negativity is a prevalent mental wavelength among the many, among the masses. So feeding you more of it, feeding their subscribers, their audience, their viewers, more of that negativity could be intended to make the listeners feel comfortable automatically at that subconscious level. Like you two, you the listener and they the podcaster are co-conspirators in your bitterness. Your friends automatically in a secret get-together conversation. Even though you haven't consciously agreed to it, what they're counting on is the majority of people listening to them will be at this negative wavelength and will resonate with it. And even though you think that you haven't agreed to this, at a deeper level, if you began listening to it, heard what was going on, and didn't step away, you did agree to it. And that makes you very easy to manipulate. It's a very old trick. It's fairly easy to spot. Wheelers and dealers have been using this method of joint pain, commiseration to close, since the basic components of human psychology became obvious to the emotional insightful of the species, for better or worse. It's a technique even the newest agent knows how to apply on a wanted asset for conversion purposes. Because if they feel like you're empathizing with their misery, or vice versa, you've now created a very intimate bond. And that makes you easy to maneuver. I think it's even in an episode of Mad Men. I don't know how many people watched that show, but there was a show a few years back called Mad Men about an advertising agency, 30 years ago. One of the marketing guys was training someone in how to close, how to convert, how to manipulate someone buying from the agency. And it was very much, sit down, start talking, make them feel comfortable, listen, wait for them to complain about something, and then join in, agree. Like you have the same problems, the same negativities in your life, the same constant complaints. Feed into that. And if they don't complain, if they don't give you that opportunity to create a manipulative bond that way, create a complaint in your life, real or not, doesn't matter, to share with them, because it creates intimacy and you'll have them eating out of your hand in no time. So there's an example of what I'm discussing here. It's that sort of a thing. It's a very simple technique to employ on people on purpose. Part of evolving in your energetic work is being able to recognize this type of thing, which sounds very easy. We all think we recognize emotional vampires and manipulators very easily, and generally we do. But we recognize it and then sometimes go along with it anyway. We don't take that step back. Or sometimes, because it is so prevalent, we don't even recognize that it's happening and that we're automatically going along with it and being controlled in that way. That we're automatically falling into this very polarized mindset. When someone is attempting to use influence on you, part of being a growing occultist is learning to know when that's going on. And you need to learn to spot it. Because if you learn to spot it, it's like 99% of the time when you're interacting with anyone, with generally non-practitioners of the craft, with a higher minded awareness. Generally, when you're interacting with people that aren't functioning from a woke state, most people, 99% of the time, the majority of people are oblivious to the constancy of their own compulsive, manipulative behaviors and intentions that they are actively using to influence others around them, just nonstop throughout their day. So for good or bad, because the manipulations of ego go both ways, it's polarization. Again, it doesn't matter if it's a positive pole or a negative pole, it's a polarization. I'm thinking of an example. For instance, take this scenario. I'm happy. So I've come up with a joke and I'm happy about this joke. And so I want you to be happy because I think the joke is funny. So I tell you the joke and I laugh and I smile afterwards because I want you to laugh and smile. That seems harmless on the surface. And it actually isn't. It's actually polarized behavior. Because if you stop to think about it, why does it matter to me if you do what I want you to do? Why does it matter to me if you also think the joke is funny? I found it funny. Why do I need you to agree with that? Why can't I choose my own response? Why can't you? Why am I not giving you that right without making it part and parcel of how I then judge myself? Why is your behavior, let's say you're the one trying to get someone else to laugh without even knowing that you're behaving that way. Why is your behavior based around predicting or coercively creating the response in someone else? Oh, you think it is it? Oh, you're just grinning and laughing and trying to get me to laugh too because you're expressing yourself. Oh, okay. Well, that's fine then. That's lovely. That's wonderful. Let's test it. I'll remain entirely neutral and not join in your laughter, in your so-called self-expression. You laugh and smile, and I'll sit here calmly and quiet and not respond in any way, good or bad, negative or positive, to you in your expectations of me, in the ways you expect me to behave. I just won't respond. And let's see how long before you become uncomfortable, how long before you have to recognize that your ego is going to confront and challenge you internally with sensations of awkwardness, embarrassment, insecurity, irritation, perhaps, that I'm not joining in, or even anger that I'm not doing what you expect me to do. See, that's ego right there. It's hiding behind that curtain. And ego in and of itself isn't this horrible thing that we have to get rid of. But it does, when we discuss it in this way, it is an advanced mechanism of polarization in common play among the majority of people. That's just how they function. Now, with another experienced occultist in the room, let's say, this same scenario happens, and they can laugh, they can smile, they can tell this joke, they can self-express by choice, and I can never react in any particular way, and they will never mind it. They will never judge themselves for laughing at their own joke that they found funny. They will never have an expectation of how I should behave. It won't bother them at all. Whether I laugh, cry, yell, they won't become insecure or angry if I sit in complete silence and just stare at them. They won't feel the need to judge me based on my actions instead of their own, because I'm not feeding their ego's expectations quickly enough or ever at all. They won't judge me for that. An advanced occultist isn't fazed by the unexpected, emotional or otherwise, because like me, they're operating from a state of internal harmony, internal balance that doesn't rely on the reactions and interactions of the sensate plane around them, whether or not it's another individual or something that's happening. That's not what's dictating their choices. If they're depolarized, and I'm depolarized, if we're two advanced occultists sitting in a room, we can both behave and do whatever we want in that room with each other, and neither of us are going to gain control over the other's emotional state or ever even attempt to, because we aren't invested or dependent on trying to. We aren't dependent on knowing ourselves through someone else. We aren't playing a game of dominancy and submission the way the majority of people do. So if I'm in a room with another occultist and we're both behaving in a very depolarized way and we're functioning at our best, and they're actually expressing themselves by choice, it's their choice and not their egos. So they can laugh loudly at something and I can choose to not laugh. And it will change nothing at all between us energetically. It will change nothing in the dynamic of the conversation. There will be no judgment involved. I could start weeping or screaming or anything. And if this other person is depolarized, they can be there with me in those moments without ever getting caught up in what can be a very harmful crucible of being influenced by them, or even more chaotically, needing to then also engage in either the pretense or the reality of experiencing those vacillations of energetic displacement of emotion as well. There's no reason for them. But look to your life, right? Look to the majority of your interactions with others. Most people don't behave this way. Most people act the other way. Their ego runs the show all day, every day. They're never actually making informed decisions, whether it's how they speak in conversation, or how they behave in public, or whether or not they choose to laugh at a joke. Even if they do think it's funny, you don't always have to laugh. It's not your job to make someone else feel better. It's all just action and reaction with the majority of people. To put it very simply, it's this constant push and pull. When you become somewhat experienced in the great work, you walk around and your day is almost a different version of reality because you can very much see this going on. It becomes so blatant, so obvious. This very sheep herd mentality response rather than the shepherd causally choosing how to behave. So, in response to this direct message, if this other YouTube channel you're listening to is full of things like complaints, it's probably not the best source for you to gain primary information from about how to be depolarized, which is a huge part of magical training. Simply because they're not exemplifying the example. They're not setting the example of what you should do. It might be a wonderful opportunity, however, for you to hone your skill of learning to recognize this sort of thing. You know what's going on now. So maybe continue listening to it and you not feel the need to react to it or to fall in line with it or to become addicted to it. You can use it to train yourself, to desensitize yourself to it by listening to a flagrant example of it while you keep mindful awareness that what is going on there is this constant polarized negativity. You can learn from them in that way. Someone who complains to make you feel comfortable because they're supposedly just like you or want to gain your sympathy or whatever. Or someone who is complaining because their egoically uninformed sense of commiseration is seeking affirmation. Either way, it's a lovely presentation of how not to go about being energetically advanced in your own practice. And that is a valuable lesson. So that person doing that isn't fake. They're teaching you something. They just aren't teaching you what they thought they were teaching you. As for what was it? The cats getting sick? Their cats get sick and they talk about it and you didn't like that or something? Or getting attacked with curses, I think you mentioned, physical injuries, that sort of a thing. That's all just a lot of misperceived challenges on their part, being conveyed in the worst light by them. That's how they're perceiving obstacles as being harmful, which, if you're an occultist, you know obstacles aren't harmful. They're what makes you great. It sounds like a lot of victim mentality to me, possibly self-aggrandization, going on inside of this person's communications in their podcast, with perhaps some possibly temporal plane adaptations and evolutions being seen by them, but then expressed as negative only. Because physical injuries or illnesses are real. Like their cats get sick. That's a reality. And it might not be a pleasant reality, but it's a reality, and it doesn't have to be unpleasant when you understand what's going on there. What's going on there is the experience of time. Our vessels on this plane are what they are. We get sick and injured too, just like cats. Our vessels are made to experience vagaries, time, change, transmission. Our bodies are made to be delicate, prone to wear and tear, avidly descriptive of all the beautiful things we go through, all the beautiful changes that vessel is a part of and gets to experience. I will suggest here that if someone is not only always sick, which might be what you're picking up on in this person, or always undergoing serious ailment, serious injury, always having their body fall prey to constant detriment, constant effects, there's probably a greater imbalance going on there. A lot of stress, maybe, poor self-care. Even the greatest magician in the world, I know a lot of very advanced occultists, formalized occultists, high priests that have been doing this for 30 years. And even they will on occasion overextend themselves in some way, and it'll create an injury. And what they become aware of very quickly is, oh, that happened because I wasn't paying enough attention over here. I lost balance. I lost focus. And stress as well. We all can fall prey to it. It's a less than desirable mental state. And those imbalances, those things, they're there to work or not. They're part of our journey. But yes, if someone's constantly in that state, constantly in the state of having things go wrong, that's not likely the best individual to be labeling as your guru and taking your training from, unless you want to embody that. If you want to embody that, then by all means, keep taking your training from them. Most advanced occultists don't get very injured or very ill all that often throughout the expression of their higher thresholds and learnings. It does happen, but it doesn't happen all that often. They're not ever really stuck in a victim or a martyr mentality physically. And there's a clue in that. And it's because they're harmonically balanced. And when they do, because as I said, we all do it sometimes. Even the best of us tend to overextend. But when we do, we don't discuss it nonstop. We don't focus on it. We don't make it the highlight of what's happening to us. What we make the highlight of is, this happened, here's why, where did I lose balance? Right? Or maybe it's something I had no control over, and there's my lesson. To be aware that the illusion is control in this circumstance. So that is where we place our focus, not on the continuing reinformation to ourselves and others, the constant complaining about it going on. Because an advanced practitioner of the great craft can actually be dying from some awful disease, and you won't ever hear them complain. Their joys and strengths of character will in no way be diminished as they go through what we call publicly a transformation of life and death. So that's something to be mindful of. Just in general, if someone's complaining all the time or things are always going wrong for them, probably not the best person with the most experience of what you want to embody. Last little bit of insight in response to your questions. It really isn't the supposed injuries, these hex attacks, their cats getting sick in the person you describe that makes them highly suspect as a less than useful source of an occult example to take your cues from. It's that they're feeling the need to discuss it as ad nauseum. That's why you've picked up on it. That's why you're asking about it. It's their need to focus on it, to pass it along to you energetically in a YouTube podcast. That's what makes them suspect. And remember, that still doesn't mean that you can't learn a lot from them and from what they're doing in other ways. To answer your last little bit of, is my life perfect? Why don't I talk about these things? I don't complain about things because it's not where my mind is. It's not where my focus is placed. And even if my focus were placed there, the last thing I'd want to do is to pass that along energetically to someone else. Talking about a problem doesn't create a solution. If you're in a room of occultists, you're going to see a room of people offering solutions and not discussing the problem. If you're in a mixed room of people and a lot of people are complaining about a problem, the one that's most energetically advanced is going to be the person who steps forward with the solution instead of wasting time discussing the problem. So, to answer your question, no, my life isn't perfect. I don't want it to be. I don't complain about things because I don't want there to ever be a state of perfection while I'm undergoing this part of my experience as a human being in the temporal plane. I can think of nothing worse than that, to have no experience, no challenge, no obstacle, no growth, creating space for my process of evolution and adaptation. It isn't that occultists don't have problems. It's that adepts of the great art adore their problems as opportunities. So we don't define them with the same word you're using. We don't label them problems the way most other people do. We see opportunities and then choose whether or not to respond to them. That's what I think creates a lot of confusion. Along with, yes, on the DL, just between you and me. See how easy it was to create that sense of intimacy? Things do go wrong less for occultists. They do. The more energetic power and balance that you start to learn to use accurately, there are some perks of advanced power integration and interplay expertise. So if someone's complaining a lot, they're probably just not that good at magic yet. You don't have to protect yourself from things like hexes and curses once you've gained a certain level of mastery. Those things just can't touch you once you've crossed certain thresholds. And when things do interact with you, you don't see them the same way as you used to. Although, a good solid banishing ritual and psychic sealing never hurt anyone. Until next time.